Let's put into practice what we were just talking about in regards to the HTML imports. We're going to create a page that's similar to the one that we were working with when we worked with the HTML templates. This one, though, needs to look a little bit different. So far, if we look at the web page, this is what it looks like. So here it is. I've just changed some of the text in the headers and the paragraph. I have the same button, and currently it's not going to do anything. What we need to do is we need to create a separate page that's going to act as the template page. So I'll go ahead and I'll make a new page. I'm going to save this out, and I'm just going to call it template1.html. The only content that's going to be on this page is our template tag. And then the template tag is going to contain whatever text we want to put inside it. And it could be text, it could be a script, it could be images, it could be anything. We'll just make a paragraph for now. And I'm just saving this page as an HTML page. I'm going to go back into the web imports page that we were just working from, and we're going to modify some of the code here. Now, before I start linking to the template file, I'm going to need to include the polyfill. Remember, the polyfill is necessary for web components that aren't fully supported. The HTML imports are not supported in many of the modern browsers. The polyfill is going to ensure that we will get support in those other browsers. So I'm going to have a script tag, and my script tag is going to be pointing to an external JavaScript file that I've already downloaded. I'm storing it in my scripts folder, and it's called webcomponentslite.js. I'll set the type to text JavaScript. If you're going to include the polyfill, you must ensure that it precedes the import. So make sure that you put the polyfill script tag before you add your link tag. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make a link tag. Now, I want to make sure that I change the rel attribute. It should not say style sheet, but it should say import, because this is going to be an HTML import that I'm using. Just like with a style sheet, I'll use the href file, and I'm going to go ahead and link to the template file that I want to pull in. In addition, I'm going to give an ID to this element. So we'll just call this tmpl file. I need to have an ID so I can reference this with my JavaScript. And the rest of the page is very similar to what we had before. I have a main tag that wraps around everything. I have a header tag with an h1 and an h2. I have an article tag, and notice that in the article tag I have a div with an ID of import content. This is an empty div tag. This div tag is creating this bit of space right here, and that's where our new content is going to be inserted on our page. I also have the button with an ID of button new, and this is going to be the trigger that will activate the insertion of that new content. I already have the script tag down at the bottom of the page, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to add some JavaScript. I'm going to create a variable called count and make it equal to 1. This is simply so that I can insert a number so that when we click the button, it'll say this is paragraph 1, this is paragraph 2, this is paragraph 3. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add an event listener to the window. In the parentheses, I'm going to pass on DOM content loaded, and this is going to run a function that is going to be triggered by an event, and then we'll open the curly braces. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a click listener to the button. This function is going to listen for the button click. We're going to use our document.getElementById, and the element that we want to get is going to be our button new, and I'm going to add an event listener to this button, and we're going to be listening for a click, and when the click is felt, we'll go ahead and run a function. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to fill out the code that is needed so we can get the content out of the imported template and stamp it into this document. The first thing to do is to get the link tag that has the import in it. This is going to give us access to the link tag. In order to do so, I'm going to create a variable, and we'll call it temple link. I'm going to make this equal to the document, and we're going to use our query selector. And now I need to tell my script what it is that I want to access. So we're going to use the name of the ID that we assigned to the link tag up here. In our case, it's going to be TMPL file for template file. I'm going to create another variable called template file that is going to give us access to the imports content. We're going to make that equal to templelink.import. And in this way, we'll have access to the imports content. Now we need to get the template and modify the content. This will let us query the template that's inside that document and modify the content. So we're going to query the imported document. We'll do this by creating yet another variable, and I'm going to make this equal to tmplfile.querySelector. And then we're going to pass on the ID of the element that we want to grab. I'm using TMPL. If you look in my template file, this has an ID of TMPL. So this is where I'm telling it what item in that template file that we're pulling in we want to access. So now what we want to do is we want to modify that content. We're going to use tmpl.content. Remember, that's the content property of the template. Then we're going to chain in the query selector. And in this case, what we want to grab is going to be the span tag. So in parentheses, inside of quotes, we're going to add our span tag. So this is pretty similar to what we did in that HTML template lesson that we looked at prior to this one. I'm going to chain in that I want to modify the text content and make it equal to the value of count, which is my variable that is going to increase or increment every time the button is clicked. Now we need to make a deep copy of the template content and import it into the current document. We're going to add the new content to the page using the deep copy. We'll use the same sort of code that we used before. I'm going to create a variable called new node. I'm going to make it equal to the document.import node, and then I'm going to tell it what it is that I want to import. Well, we're going to get our TMPL, which is our variable that's accessing the template file, and I'm going to pass on the property of content, and I'm going to also pass on the Boolean of true, which allows it to have that deep copy access. And finally, we're going to update this current document by using the document.getElementById. Via my script, I'm indicating where on my page I want this new content to be inserted. So we're going to insert it into the import content div, which is the name of that empty div that we've created, and this is where we want the new content to be inserted. We're going to use append child, and I want to append it with the contents of new node. Now, if I save my page and we go ahead and refresh the page and click on our button, you're going to see that nothing happens. If you open up your developer tools and check out your developer tools, you're going to see that you have 3 errors. So if we click on the errors, you're going to see that we have several errors. The first one is an uncaught syntax error in the web components light. We don't need to worry about this one. The second one is saying that it's at line 1 of my file, my HTML file, and it's saying that it doesn't have access to the imported resource. The origin null has been blocked by CORE's policy. Invalid response, origin null is therefore not allowed access. It's also telling me that there is a problem at line 45. It cannot read the property query selector of null. The reason that I'm having these problems right now is because I'm just testing this page locally. In order for this to work, we're loading content into our page, and we don't have the ability to do this unless we're on a server or we are mimicking a server environment. So what I actually need to do is I need to move all my files onto the web, or I need to use some sort of local development server. I'm using MAMP, so I'm just going to move my files into my MAMP folder. I'll just go ahead and do that really quickly. And now that I've opened up my file that's being hosted on my local server, I can click the button, add new content, and you can see that the new content is added to the page, and that will just continue to update and add as many times as I click the button. If I go ahead and open up my developer tools again, you can see that I still have one warning. This one warning is something to do in the web components file. My file is working fine, so if you do get this, just don't worry about it. You can see that the other errors that we were getting, though, have now been alleviated. And if we look in our div, we have our div called import content, and if I open it up, it's going to contain the new content that we specified. And I believe I mentioned this once before, but the content, it does not have to be isolated to paragraph content. If I wanted to display an image content, I could do that as well. So I'm going to just load an image. And if I save my page and we refresh the page, now when I click add new content, you can see when I click the button, it not only is loading the paragraph content, but it's also loading my image. And if I click this again, I'm going to get the same image loaded multiple times. So now you can see that the content is being changed and is being added to the page. So by using the HTML imports, I've separated the template content into its own file, and now it can be individually maintained and then loaded as needed. This can be useful by itself, but it also becomes really valuable when you're building web components, and we'll look at those a little bit later on in the course.